live. Here we go. All right, everybody. Really great to see everyone. My name is Chris Richardson, President and General Counsel of BDV Solutions. I'm honored to have today John, who is our Executive Vice President and Head of Government Relations. I know you were on this last week, John, but John, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to people who don't know you?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. My name is John Baselice. I'm not going to repeat my title, but I am very happy to be here at BDV Solutions because there's a lot of things that this company is doing for our client base that, it's real exciting stuff, and it's really rewarding when we succeed and help a lot of smaller to middle-sized businesses meet their workforce needs so they can grow, and you see them succeed. It's great to be here. So thanks for having me.
No problem. So I want to let's get right on into it. The thing everyone really cares about is visa retrogression. The wait times just seem to be either increasing or stagnant. Do you know if there's any movement in Congress or within the White House to do something about visa retrogression?
I can tell you they've heard about it because I've been asking about it. So at the very least, they know that this is an issue. The likelihood that something's going to get dealt with in the near term, I think, is quite low, just because there are so many other priorities that the Trump administration and all the component parts that fall underneath the White House, whether it's the State Department, it's the Labor Department, it's DHS. And you also have the Commerce Department with Secretary Lutnick playing a big role with the EB-3 gold card reforms that are allegedly forthcoming. All of these things are clearly taking up priority here, and a lot of this, not all of it, but a lot of it is playing into the discussion on budget reconciliation, trying to keep the tax rates that were put into place under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 2017. They want to extend that. Those are all taking precedence right now. And knowing that that's the case, it's not as if the idea hasn't been conveyed to them. Look, if you actually want to help pay down the $36 trillion in debt the federal government owes, you can look to immigration reforms as a way to help increase the amount of revenue you're generating and doing it at no cost to the American taxpayer. But it is a very small minority of people that are making this case right now.
Gotcha. And what do you think, John, from the BDV perspective, what are we going to do on our end to try to help with retrogression? I think that's something that our customers all want to hear about is what's BDV going to be doing? What are we going to be advocating for to help retrogression on our end?
Well, Chris, there's a couple things. First is the issue that we just discussed in terms of trying to tell them, look, why don't you try to telling folks in Congress, look at proposing legislation that would deal with this retrogression issue, whether it is recapturing unused visas, which I know some folks, particularly Maria Salazar and the Dignity Act gang, are looking at inputting into the next version of the Dignity Act being proposed this Congress. The other thing is from an administrative standpoint, we are looking at trying to ensure that if there are a lot of unused family-based visas in the remainder of FY25, those visas need to spill down across all the family-based preference categories and then fall over into the employment-based categories. Is this necessarily something that is going to be a long-term fix for retrogression? Clearly not. But any little bit counts. And during the Biden administration, at the very least, they were very good at ensuring that unused family-based visas went into the employment-based quota for the following year, and all those visas were issued. And it was not a fait accompli during those last couple of years that the Biden administration was actually going to issue all those visas. But if there are available visas, they should be used, particularly for the folks that we represent, Chris.
No, that makes sense. And what in thinking about Rep. Salazar's bill and thinking about the bills that are floating around, what would be the trigger point, you think, for the Democrats and Republicans to come together to actually pass some kind of immigration reform? Like, is it that they have to deport a certain number of people? Do they have to like undo a certain number of things? Like, at what point do they sit down and say, okay, so we've done everything that we need to do on our ends. Now we're serious about immigration reform. What would that be?
Chris, I think I don't have the requisite crystal ball to tell me what exactly that would be. But if I had to go with my gut instinct, I think it would have to be the passage of whatever's in this reconciliation package with the border changes that they want to make. Mm-hmm. Once those things go into effect, that to me that's the bare minimum that particularly congressional Republicans, particularly in the House, that's what they need to say. Listen, we've done this. The border situation has improved. We've now secured it. Now we can get on to more fulsome topics with regard to our vastly suboptimal immigration system in the United States. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do I necessarily think that's going to be enough? No. I do think there needs to be some other sort of exogenous shock that gets Congress out of its 3.5-decade-long paralysis when it comes to dealing with sound, common sense immigration reform. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, I had looked at the ongoing lawsuit involving the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, otherwise known as DACA. That case is still pending in the Fifth Circuit because there is going to be a rehearing en banc for the whole entire circuit court before it goes to the Supreme Court. So this is something that we're looking at. Earliest would be next spring, in terms of that being the action forcing event that says, all right, we got to do something. And let's just game that out and say that's what we're looking at. Mm-hmm. Likelihood at that point is it's June 23rd, 2026. I don't find it highly likely that between that date and whenever it is that Congress is going to go out on its August recess, I don't see much of anything getting done there. Mm-hmm. I do see it being a lame duck exercise in the sense that once we have the 2026 midterms, we'll know exactly where things stand, whether or not these immigration policies were a winning message or a losing message, because that's how it will be interpreted.
Right.
And if that's the case, well, then maybe that November, December, there's something that's bigger and broader, and not necessarily a massive 1,000-page comprehensive reform package, but something that does what I would consider a down payment on all facets of our immigration system. We'll make a little change here, a little change there, a little change here, and a little change there, and hopefully that will help us, if not get more visas in the overall quotas, at least give us some sort of flexibility moving forward. Because if you compare the United States immigration system to that of Canada, Australia, even some of the countries in the EU, they just do a better job managing their backlogs.
Mm-hmm. Right. And do you think that what are some of the things, and I talked to David Baer about this as well. We had a Facebook Live about it. But from your perspective, what are some of the things that we could do as a country to better manage our backlogs?
This I could go all day, Chris. But I will try to give us all the Cliff Notes version. Mm-hmm. Look, there's the very simple way of, can we just increase the numbers? I think it's very politically difficult, but can you just increase the numbers?
Yeah.
There are also means of trying to, can you expand exemptions for cap applicability? I mean, you see this on the H1 side. There's H1B cap exempt categories for folks that work in higher ed, research institutions, things like that. Could you replicate this in other contexts? Could we propose, the Conrad 30 program? Right now it's just for doctors. The last time I've talked to quite a few healthcare providers, they need nurses, they need med techs, they need PAs and all sorts of other folks. Is there a way to try to exempt them from the quotas? Whether it's on a permanent going forward basis or for a temporary period of time. There are that this speaks a lot to me because my 10-year-old son, he gave up chocolate for Lent. There's more than one way to eat this Reese's peanut butter cup. And there's many different ways that we can go about doing this, but you have a quota system that was fit for the U.S. economy in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And however you expand the gauge to allow more folks to flow through that pipe legally, and that's an unfortunate distinction that rarely gets made in immigration research. But having more legal immigrants and the impact that would have on the unauthorized flows coming into the United States, there's no other way that you're going to put the cartels in Mexico out of a job, or at least take a dent into their product line, unless you start to really get serious about having more ways for folks to come here legally, both on a permanent and a temporary basis.
Mm-hmm. And from your perspective, and BDV's perspective, what are the priorities here, John? Like, what are the things that we really are like, okay, so in this year, this is what we're going to focus on. Is it DOL? Is it USCIS? Like, what are the things that, from a government relations perspective, that we're going to focus on to try to help our clients move the ball forward?
Chris, we're going to hit everything. We're not just going to focus on just one thing over another. But the way that you characterize it, like with regard to the Labor Department, they are processing permanent and temporary labor certifications as slow as molasses on a cold day. That has to change. We've actually had several meetings with our friends at the Labor Department. They understand the problems that we're having, and they understand this is bigger than just BDV. This is a critical component to ensuring that you have a well-functioning legal immigration system. They understand it. I imagine it's going to take them some time to get to a place where they can finally start to pick up the pace on issuing prevailing wage determinations. These things should not take, a year and a half to do. These things should take a matter of weeks, maybe a couple months if it's a complicated case. It should not take as long as it is today. The same thing can go for temporary labor certs and permanent labor certs. These things should be done in a timely fashion. You look at the data on Q3 for H-2B applications, labor certification applications. I think it was maybe 5%, give or take 1 or 2, in terms of those that were adjudicated in a timely fashion. I've never worked the Labor Department, but I can tell you right now, if I did, that would be something that should be just a mark of shame and embarrassment. Not something of just like, oh, this is how we do things. Right. With regard to USCIS, there's definitely concerns about an increase in requests for evidence, an increase in notices of intent to deny. The scrutiny is going to pick up a little bit for these applications. I'd say the same thing's going to happen with the State Department too, but we can wait for the State Department in a second. But in terms of what we're working with the folks at USCIS and with CBP, when folks come in, we want to make sure that folks that are coming here legally and are coming here to work for one of our clients here in the United States, we want to make sure that their experience is with as few hiccups as possible. And there's a lot that goes into that. But the big thing for us is like, listen, just it's almost like the Hippocratic Oath when it comes to immigration. Like, at first, do no harm. Please just let these folks that are coming through, like, don't have it hang up in all sorts of processing nonsense, for lack of a better term. And with regard to the State Department, there's always a concern about getting visa interviews in a timely fashion. There's a lot of concern about looking at folks' social media. We want to make sure that folks can get their interviews in a timely fashion so they can get to work at our client sites in a timely fashion. And that's critical for us in many ways. So, and in terms of Congress, we want to make sure that we're getting pieces of legislation introduced that are going to help. In my view, it's not just going to help BDV, although, listen, I work for BDV, so does Chris. Like, we're motivated by self-interest, but I don't think I'm speaking out of turn and saying that the changes that we want to see happen would serve the country well, and everybody else that needs to use the immigration system as well. The other thing that we're doing with Congress is to make sure that when we have issues, when our clients have issues, when their employees have issues, we're on top of it. And we're making sure that the companies that are in particular states and particular districts, their representatives in the House and the Senate know that they're having problems. And we're getting them engaged with the administration to let them know, hey, listen, we have X amount of workers who need to get an interview. And Chris, we actually had this happen a couple weeks ago where we had a very seamless operation involving some folks in Central Florida. And magically, the appointments at El Salvador and Honduras just, they magically happened. So, and we're going to continue to do that because that's what keeps, all of your companies operating in the best possible fashion that they can when you're relying upon foreign nationals to meet your workforce needs.
And John, have you seen from your angle any trends now that there is a Trump administration? One thing that we're getting a lot of questions about on the Facebook group is about people who are, they've basically been working for their sponsor in EB-3 or EB-2 or EB-1, and they go for their visa interviews and they're facing, rejection. We've always kind of seen that, even with the Biden administration. We saw that occasionally. And my perspective on that's always been that there's always other stuff behind the scenes that we don't necessarily see. We weren't at the interview. We don't know what was said during the interview. I have not seen any dramatic increase in that trend that people are being denied EB-3 or EB-2 or EB-1. In fact, it seems like it's been kind of the same as it was under the Biden. I haven't seen a dramatic increase in RFEs or a dramatic increase in denials as of yet. And there's always some other stuff going on behind the scenes. Although I have seen a couple of cases that just got denied oddly. And obviously we appeal those and we win. But John, have you seen anything from your perspective on the legal immigration side that you can say, ooh, this is a new trend by the Trump administration?
Well, Chris, I've got my fingers crossed your comments because we haven't seen any of these trends yet with regard to denials. What I am seeing, and it's not necessarily something that is focused on the operations of the immigration system, but what I am seeing in terms here in DC, we're definitely seeing an awful lot of executive actions being taken, or at least being foreshadowed or telegraphed in the future. And I think those are a sign of the struggle that's going on in the White House and the executive branch agencies in terms of how they actually want to move forward. You have one cohort of people that wants to clamp down immigration as hard as possible. And then you have another cohort of people, many of whom were staunch supporters of the president during his campaign in 2024, who are saying something completely different. They're advocating for the polar opposite. So you're just seeing a lot of how does this administration toe the line? How can we show we're tough on enforcement? How can we show business interests that we're going to be helpful to them? One encouraging trend that I am seeing, and I wish I had a wood table instead of this Formica table. I could knock on it. But you're seeing the business-focused, more pragmatic voices that are closest to the president that are winning these arguments. We saw it back during Christmas 2024. I did not imagine having an H-1B kerfuffle on Twitter on Christmas in 2024, but it happened. And at the end of it, what does President Trump say? He says, listen, I like the H-1B program. I think it's great. It was not a foregone conclusion that in the last few weeks that the Trump administration was actually going to issue supplemental visas. This was something that I and my colleagues in the government relations department here at BDV we pushed very hard on members to say, listen, you have to do this. It's been something that's been done for the last 9 years. If you say you're not going to do this, you're going to have a ton of businesses, many of whom are smaller companies, and a lot of them are very outspoken supporters of President Trump. Like this will be the first time you're disappointing a lot of people. And lo and behold, they not only made the announcement, they've also been very timely in making sure that the interview dates are being allotted in a timely fashion. The visas are being made available within a reasonable amount of time. It wasn't a pretty picture getting there.
Right.
It was an awful lot of persuading,
right,
and arguing that had to take place. But if there's one thing that I'm noticing here, it's a silver lining in an awful lot of clouds, is we're seeing at the end of the day, it may take longer than we want to, but at least the right decisions have been made thus far with regard to getting legal workers into the country.
Right. Let's see. I want to put there's a couple questions that we're getting. One of them is about people who have current priority dates, nevertheless not getting interviews. I will take that to answer to say that every embassy and consulate has kind of its own priority date, meaning that even though you are overall in the universe current, if you are interviewing at an embassy in Bangladesh or Nepal, they have even later or earlier priority dates than the official priority date, meaning that because their volume is so high, even though you are eligible to be interviewed, the embassies just don't have the staff to actually do any interviews. And so I think that there is like a disconnect in some countries where people are actually current, but nevertheless aren't getting interviews. And that really is about staffing. Which brings me to a question for you, John. The report came out this weekend that they were basically going to close all the embassies in Africa and basically shut down, fire like 25 or 20% of the officer corps. What did you think of those reports, and and kind of what your old boss, Secretary Rubio, said about them?
Well, it's not exactly pleasant news when you see this coming across the wire. I can guarantee you that. However, the story broke early last week about all this, and I've seen these efforts happen before. In 2017, President Trump tried to shut down the J-1 program completely. The same reports that came out, they wanted to completely zero out the Bureau of Educational Cultural Affairs, which is where the J-1 program has been housed since as long as I can remember. There are so many members of Congress, both in the House and Senate, that are Republicans, that if they went along with something like this, they would have hell to pay back home. I don't see how you can pass an appropriations package. And I don't want to geek out on like government spending procedures, but whether it's an appropriations package or it's passing a CR, if you're keeping the government funded and it's being funded in the way that Congress is asking them to do so, you have a bunch of money that's being appropriated to these departments that are allegedly going to be zeroed out. It's going to be a very interesting set of circumstances moving forward. Not to state the obvious here, but there will be lawsuits, and the president can't be Congress for a day.
Right.
So if Congress says you must, these are the spending priorities, you're going to put it in these offices, you're going to put it in these departments. They have to be spent on something. You can't just allocate tens of millions of dollars to a department and it doesn't exist anymore. Because that's, Congress has control of the purse strings, not the president. The president's job is to faithfully execute the law. And, it doesn't give me any great pleasure to do this to my Republican friends. I got friends in both parties, but for all of the talk over the last 4 years of how President Biden just did his own thing and didn't really care what Congress had to say, it's like, well, what do we do now? Hi, pot, here's kettle. Have you two met? We're a long way off from having these types of massive changes hit. And it's still going to be a long time before the final adjudications to whether or not these cuts are constitutional, lawful, allowable under the APA, and various other considerations are going to be made. And this is another, Chris, you were asking about trends earlier. There's a lot of trends there's a lot of fireworks that go on, and then everything settles down.
Yeah.
So, you can make yourself really wound up if you just read the headlines and don't see what happens. And just, you see something like this, I do what I do. I took a deep breath. I said, all right, been here before. We know we still have friends on both sides of the aisle who really care about these programs. This is the opening salvo. And just remember, like, we're also talking about this in the context of the president's budget. I've been working in and around DC. I'm going on my 14th year. I have yet to see a president's budget get taken up by Congress. Like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Congress looks at it and says, all right, great. We're going to do what we do now. Right. I have no reason to believe that inertia is somehow going to change just because it's 2025.
One can hope.
Yes.
One can hope, John. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this Facebook Live. John and I are going to wrap it up. John, do you have any final thoughts or words?
I see some of the, took me a while to look in the comment section to find out where these questions are coming from. I finally found them. If you have specific, like case-specific questions, feel free to email me or Chris, particularly if you're looking for a job. Like, this is part of what BDV does. We connect employers who need services you provide with folks like yourselves. And we're happy to, talk with you, see what we can do to try to find you an immigration solution that can help you get to the country if you want to come here and work.
I think that makes the most sense. All right. Thanks so much, John. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. We'll do a couple more of these in the near future. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.